preparing to sell your home in Monte Vista and you think the most important part of the transaction is getting under contract, this is where we need to slow that down immediately, because getting under contract is not the finish line. It is the beginning of one of the most critical phases of the entire process, and that phase is the option period. And this is where deals are either strengthened or quietly start to fall apart. Most sellers underestimate this stage because it feels like you've already have a buyer. But in reality, the option period is where buyers are doing their deepest level of evaluation, their inspections, their contractor walkthroughs, their internal decision making. And this is where they decide not just if they like the home, but if they are comfortable moving forward at the agreed terms. And if you're not prepared for how this phase works, it can lead to stress, unexpected negotiations, and in some cases, losing the contract entirely. So what we're going to do is walk through this structured, listicle format so you understand exactly how to navigate it. And we are going to break down the top 10 things sellers need to know about the option period, along with the steps and mindset that allow you to move through it with control instead of reaction. And the first thing you need to understand, and the first reason to take the first step, is that option period is not a formality. It is a decision window for the buyer. And that means until the option expires, the buyer has the ability to terminate. And this is why your preparation before going under contract matters so much, because the stronger you prepare, the fewer surprises arise during this phase, and the more confident the buyer feels moving forward. And the second reason and second step to understanding that inspections are not the problem, they are a process, because many sellers approach the option period with anxiety about the inspections. But inspections are expected. They're part of how a buyer gathers information, and the goal is not to avoid findings. The goal is to be prepared for them. And this is why sellers who address maintenance, documentation, and condition prior to listing often experience a smoother option period, because fewer issues feel unexpected. That leads directly into the third reason and the third step, which is anticipating the inspection before it happens. This means having a clear understanding of your home's condition, what may come up, and how you plan to respond. Because when you're surprised, you react. But when you're prepared, you respond. And that difference is critical in maintaining control during negotiations. And the fourth reason and fourth step to understanding is that not all inspection items carry equal weight. Because one of the biggest mistakes sellers make is reacting to the entire inspection report as if every item must be addressed, when in reality, inspection reports often include a wide variety of observations, from minor maintenance items to more significant concerns. And your role is not to fix everything. Your role is to understand what matters, what's reasonable, and how to respond strategically. And this is where having the guidance becomes essential, because it allows you to separate signal from noise and to avoid over-conceding unnecessarily. And as we move through these steps, this is where it makes sense to pause briefly and give you a context on who is guiding this conversation, because navigating the option period effectively requires experience and perspective. I'm Caroline with Park Properties Group at the Phyllis Browning Company. I work in Central San Antonio with a focus on neighborhoods like Monte Vista. My approach is preparation, clarity, and helping sellers think several steps ahead so they are not reacting to the process, but managing it. And that perspective becomes especially important during the option period, because this is where preparation meets negotiation. And that leads directly to the fifth reason and fifth step, which is understanding buyer psychology during the option period, because buyers are not just reviewing a report, they're processing risk and cost and comfort, and how you respond during this phase directly influences how they feel about continuing forward. And when sellers become defensive or dismissive, it can create friction. And when sellers respond with clarity and reason, it builds confidence and keeps the transaction moving. And the sixth reason and sixth step is understanding the role of time during the option period, because this phase is structured with a defined window, and that is how time matters. Inspections are scheduled, reports reviewed, conversations happen, and often negotiations begin before the option ends. Being responsive, organized, and prepared during this window helps maintain momentum and reduces the risk of delays or uncertainty. And the seventh reason and seventh step is preparing for repair requests, because in most transactions, buyers will come back with some sort of request after inspections. And this is where many sellers feel pressure. This is also where strategy matters most, because you can have options, you can agree, you can negotiate, you can offer alternatives. The key is to evaluate each request in context, not emotionally, but strategically, understanding what's reasonable, what aligns with the market, what protects your position. And the eighth reason, the eighth step, is avoiding overreaction, because one of the most common and costly mistakes sellers make during the option period is reacting too quickly or too broadly to inspection findings. And this often leads to over concessions that were really not necessary. And this is where having a clear plan and trusted guidance helps you stay grounded. Evaluate requests thoughtfully and really respond in a way that keeps the deal together without giving away more than is needed. And the ninth reason and ninth step is maintaining perspective on the overall transaction, because it is easy to get focused on individual items during the option period and lose sight of the bigger picture, which is getting to closing with terms that are acceptable to both sides. And this means balancing firmness with flexibility, understanding where you can stand firm and where it makes sense to compromise, and making decisions that support your overall outcome, not just the immediate moment. And 10th reason and the 10th step is understanding that the option period is where deals are solidified, not just negotiated, because this phase is handled like it really determines whether the transaction moves forward smoothly or becomes unstable. And when you approach it with preparation, clarity, and strategy, you create a sense of confidence for the buyer. And a confident buyer are far more likely to move forward without hesitation. And when we step back and we look at the entire process, the pattern is clear. Sellers who navigate the option period successfully are not the ones who avoid the issues. They're the ones who are prepared for them. They understand their home. They anticipate the process. They respond strategically, and they stay focused on the bigger picture. And that preparation is what allows them to move through this phase with control instead of stress. So if you're preparing to sell your home in Monte Vista, the most strategic move you can make is to start the process early, to understand what may come up during the option period, and to build a plan that allows you to respond with clarity. If you want to take that next step, reach out, schedule a confidential seller strategy consultation with Caroline, with me, and my business partner, Suzanne. So we can help you understand how to prepare your home, how to position it effectively, really help you navigate every phase of the transaction with confidence. Really, we found the earlier you start, the more control you have. And in neighborhoods like Monte Vista, that helps control your equity and creates the strongest possible outcome for you. So one of the things that we like to talk about during the option period is that when the buyer starts translating the reports they have, this is where many sellers kind of feel pressure, because it can feel like everything is suddenly out for negotiation. But the key is to maintaining control is continue following the approach that we set off before you even list the house. Another reason that we really like to talk about is buyers. How they interpret those reports is important. Buyers are not reading the reports the same way a contractor or an experienced agent would. They're often seeing a long list of items, many of which sound serious simply because of how they're written. And this is where context becomes incredibly important, because not every item represents a significant issue. Part of your strategy during this phase is helping keep the conversation grounded in what actually matters. And what leads to the 12th reason and 12th step is organizing your response before you respond. Because one of the biggest mistakes sellers make is reacting immediately to the repair request without fully evaluating it. And this often leads to over concessions or unnecessary stress. So instead of responding quickly, the better approach is to review the request as a whole, understand what's being asked, and decide how you want to respond strategically. And that leads to the 13th reason and the 13th step, which is prioritizing requests based on impact, because not all repair requests carry the same weight. And this is where you begin separating what is material from what is cosmetic or routine maintenance. And when you approach it in this way, you're able to focus on your response to the items that actually influence a buyer's decision, rather than trying to address everything equally. And that leads to the 14th reason and 14th step, which is understanding your options when responding to repair requests. Because many sellers assume they're only choice is to either agree or refuse, when in reality, there are multiple ways to navigate this, including offering repairs, offering a credit, adjusting the terms, negotiating specific items, and understanding these options allows you to respond in a way that aligns with your goals while still keeping the transaction moving forward. And the 15th reason and 15th step is managing communication effectively during this phase, because tone and clarity matter just as much as the terms themselves. When communication becomes reactive or unclear, it can create unnecessary friction. But when it's structured, thoughtful, and solution-oriented, it helps maintain momentum and keep both sides focused on reaching an agreement. And the 16th reason and 16th step is avoiding the trap of fixing everything, because this is one of the most common mistakes sellers make during the option period, and it often comes from a desire to keep the deal together. But in reality, it can lead to giving away more than necessary. And the goal is not to really eliminate every concern, it's to address the items that matter in a way that is reasonable and consistent with the market. And that leads to the 17th reason and 17th step, which is staying aligned with your original strategy. Because it's easy to lose perspective during the negotiations. There's lots going on during negotiations, especially when the requests start coming in. And this is when you need to reconnect with the decisions you made before going under contract, your pricing, your preparation, your expectations, and use that as your guide rather than reacting to each individual request in isolation. And right about here, before we move into the final stretch, it is important to reinforce the role of guidance during this phase, because navigating the option period is not just about understanding the contract. It's about understanding how to interpret information, how to prioritize decisions, and how to negotiate effectively. And this is where working with someone like myself at Park Properties Group at the Phyllis Branding Company is important, because the goal is not just to get through the option period, it is to get through it in a way that protects your position, keeps the transaction on track, and that leads into the 18th reason and 18th step, which is understanding when to stand firm, because not every request should be negotiated. And part of maintaining leverage is knowing when a request falls outside of what's reasonable based on the condition of the home, the market, agreed upon terms, and being able to hold that position with confidence. And the 19th reason and 19th step is understanding when to be flexible. That's important, because while standing firm, is good, so is recognizing when flexibility helps the deal move forward. And we are there to help guide you, like, hey, this is what you need to do. When it becomes critical, because successful negotiations are rarely about one side winning, they are about both sides reaching an agreement they can move forward with. And the 20th reason and 20th step is managing timelines within the option period, because this phase is not open-ended, and delays in response or unclear communication can create unnecessary pressure as deadlines approach. So staying organized and responsive helps keep the process moving smoothly. The 21st reason and the 21st step is preparing for the possibility of termination. Not expecting it, but being aware that it is an option for the buyer. And this awareness allows you to approach the process with a level of calm and control, because you understand the structure of the contract. You're not caught off guard by the possibility. And when you look at this phase as a whole, it becomes clear that the option period is not just about inspections and repairs. It's about decision-making, communication, strategy, and sellers who navigate successfully are the ones who stay grounded and evaluate requests thoughtfully and respond in a way that keeps the transaction aligned with their goals. And this sets the stage for the final phase of the process, where negotiations are complete, the option period ends, and the transaction moves towards closing. We go pending. And in the next section, we're going to walk through what happens after the option period, how to maintain momentum, how to avoid the final set of mistakes that can still impact your outcome even after you've successfully navigated this critical stage. And as you move into this final phase after the option period, this is where the dynamic of the transaction shifts again, because once the option period expires, the buyer's ability to terminate for unrestricted reasons has ended. And that alone changes the tone, the leverage, and the overall momentum of the deal. And this is where many sellers assume the hard part is over. Yay! But in reality, there are still important steps that need to be managed carefully to protect your outcome. So we're going to continue the list and walk through the final set of steps you need to understand on how to move forward from contract to to closing with the same level of clarity and control. And the 22nd reason and 22nd step is recognizing the shift in leverage once the option period ends. Because at this point, the transaction becomes more stable, and there are still some contingencies such as financing and appraisal. But the buyer has now demonstrated a higher level of commitment and understanding that this shift allows you to move forward with more confidence and less uncertainty. The 23rd reason and 23rd step is preparing for the appraisal, because this is often the next major milestone after the option period. And while it is a separate part of the process, it's still connected to everything that has to come before it, including pricing, condition, and how the home has been positioned in the market. And being prepared for this step means understanding how appraisals work and how they can impact the transaction if there are discrepancies. And the 24th reason and 24th step is maintaining the condition of the home throughout the closing. Because once you're under contract, the expectation is that the home will be delivered in the same condition. And this means continuing to care for the property, addressing any agreed upon repairs, and ensuring that nothing changes that could create a concern for the buyer. And the 25th reason and 25th step is contemplating any negotiated repairs or agreements with clarity, because if you agree to a specific item during the option period, those need to be handled properly and documented by a licensed contractor. And this is where attention to detail becomes important, because incomplete or unclear work can create issues later in the process. And that leads in the 26th reason and 26th step, which is staying organized with documentation, receipts, communication, because having a clear record of what's been completed helps avoid confusion and keeps the transaction moving smoothly. I'm Caroline Decherd with the Park Properties Group at the Phyllis Browning Company, specialized in historic homes in Central San Antonio. Would love to help you list your home. Give us a call if you'd like to talk about it.